Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Charges have been amended against a 40-year-old woman in connection with last month's hostage-taking in Lethbridge. Alberta Justice Minister Tyler Shandro offers more reasons as to why the province wants to move ahead with a provincial police force. And a legendary Medicine Hat sportscaster and the voice of the Medicine Hat Tigers is retiring. Bob Ridley is signing off the air following a stellar broadcasting career.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge police have amended charges against a 40-year-old woman in connection with a hostage-taking incident on July the 14th. Following further investigation, police determined the airsoft handgun seized at the scene met the definition of a firearm, so now the suspect faces firearm-related charges. Courtney Louise Shaw of Lethbridge also faces charges including attempted murder, aggravated assault, and taking a hostage. The victim, Catherine Linder, was released from hospital and continues to recover after receiving multiple stab wounds to her neck. The Alberta government announced a blueprint for a provincial police service that would add 275 frontline police officers to our province's 42 detachments. Justice Minister Tyler Shandro says Alberta is still studying the potential of a provincial police force. He says it is sorely needed because the RCMP's mandate is stretched far too thin.
The federal government themselves admit it. Briefing notes provided to the minister responsible for the RCMP contain the following points that I just want to take a moment to quote verbatim. Quote, "Under-resourcing is resulting in officer health and wellness concerns," end quote. Another quote, "Federal policing responsibilities have been and are being eroded to meet contract needs," end quote. And there's this one. "It has been the Government of Canada's objective since the 1960s to decrease its contract policing financial liability," end quote. And that's why so many provinces and municipalities with RCMP contracts are looking at alternatives.
Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson has more details as to what the provincial police force may actually look like here in Alberta.
The idea is to sort of take some of these services and move them from Edmonton and Calgary into smaller sort of population areas. And what the government says this will do is set a minimum detachment size of 10 officers. Apparently some detachments in the province are more like 3 officers, and that should help things like response time and all that sort of stuff. It would amount to, the government says, about 275 new officers in sort of rural and small town Alberta. So this is sort of the logistics of it, not a super exciting announcement, but it gives us a look at what this could look like.
Dawson says the province is still not 100% sold on the idea of a provincial police force. He'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. Chief Superintendent Darren Campbell said Police Commissioner Brenda Lucki and former Public Safety Minister Bill Blair meddled politically in the investigation into the 2020 shooting spree in Nova Scotia that left 23 people dead. Campbell spoke to the House of Commons Public Safety Committee as it sorts through conflicting reports about what really happened.
There was pressure for information from all sides, whether it be the public, the media, government, within the organization itself. But it was clear during that meeting that the commissioner had said that she had made a promise and that it was tied to the legislation. I can't speak to who it was that might have had those conversations. I can only speak to the fact that I was involved in a meeting on April 28th, and that's what I heard and that's what I made notes of.
Federal Public Safety Minister Marco Menoncino says the Canada Border Services Agency is stepping up efforts in preventing the smuggling of firearms into Canada. Earlier this month, the federal government announced a ban on the importation of restricted handguns into our country.
This has to be one of 3 pillars when it comes to reducing gun violence in Canada. So first, continuing to invest in law enforcement in our CBSA at our borders to stop illegal trafficking of guns. Second, we need to make sure that we are preventing gun crime from occurring in the first instance, and that is something that we're doing with the rollout of the Building Safer Communities Fund. This is a $250 million fund that gets at root causes through partnerships with local and grassroots organizations who know best how to put tangible, concrete solutions to give more capacity to those communities and those young people, especially who are at risk. And I look forward to exploring those opportunities to leverage that fund here in the Niagara Falls region, the Halton region, right across to Ontario. And beyond that, the third pillar is making sure that we pass smart, common sense laws like Bill C-21.
The government's measure will prevent nearly all individuals and businesses from importing handguns into Canada beginning on Friday. New figures from the 2021 census show a record high number of people in Canada now have a mother language other than English or French. Stats Canada also says the number of people whose mother tongue is English rose in Quebec.
In 2021, 1 in 8 Canadians predominantly spoke at home a language other than English or French, which represent an increase since the last census, and it's increasing over the decades. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Canadians know or speak one or both Canada's official languages, with over 9 in 10 individuals speaking English or French at home, at least on a regular basis.
Experts say sky-high inflation is putting more Canadian seniors at risk of social isolation. Many older adults live on fixed pensions or government benefits that are not keeping pace with the rate of inflation this year. This means that many seniors are being forced to cut back on gas, transit fares, and entertainment costs such as eating out. Seniors who also cannot afford the internet or a cell phone are also less able to stay in touch with family and friends. Loneliness and social isolation in older adults has also been linked to depression, increased number of falls, and even premature death. Well, it cooled off just a little bit here in Lethbridge. If you want to consider maybe high 20s cooling off. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the mercury should be climbing once again as the week continues to progress.
Yeah, Hal, temperatures should be sitting steady at 32 degrees almost every day of this week, with that heat warning still in effect for much of southern Alberta. Now, visitors and residents of the area are advised to take precautions from the heat, such as rescheduling outdoor activities, staying cool and indoors as much as possible, and also keeping hydrated. That reprieve from the heat won't be coming until about next Tuesday when we see a little bit of moisture to the region. I'll have that 7-day forecast coming up for you later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The City of Lethbridge is hoping to hear from residents about the upcoming 2023 through 2026 budget deliberations. They'll take place starting in November. Locals are encouraged to go online and visit the My 2 Cents campaign, which will allow them to give their own 2 cents on how they think the budget should be spent. Lethbridge's Deputy Mayor, Jen Schmidt-Rempel, says setting the budget is one of the most important things the council does.
This gives residents an opportunity to take a look, see how they would designate the budget, see how that would directly impact their own income taxes, and they make decisions and alterations from there based on what they would like to pay for income taxes, based on what's important to their family and what their priorities are, and then sort of find a balance and see what City Council goes through. The information is gathered, brought back to City Council, and it gives us an opportunity to see some of those things that residents and families find important in our community, and helps us inform a little bit better as we're making those budget decisions come the fall.
The campaign is on now and will run until September the 9th. You can provide your input on the budget by visiting the Get Involved Lethbridge website. Canada's made the top 10 list of countries with the best work-life balance. Now that's according to a new study by the company Tupalti. Our country came in at number 5, with the average working hours close to $1,700 per year and the average salary just over $43,000. The average pension, meanwhile, came in at $41,000. The CEO of the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, Cindy Bester, says in our city, people are starting to become more aware of work-life balance.
More people, I think, are willing to have that conversation. Whereas the generation before us, or including me, you had to work hard so you could play hard. And now we're finding that, no, we can get our job done properly and still enjoy our life. That isn't the case in all industries, but I do think that is where we're moving towards, hopefully.
According to the study, the number 1 country with the best work-life balance was Switzerland coming in at just under 1,600 hours worked per year. The average pay in Switzerland, by the way, was almost $83,000. A new film about the Afghanistan war is being shot near Medicine Hat this week. The documentary is called Fallen Heroes, Their Journey Home. It will highlight the Canadian soldiers who made their way home after the war and the highway of heroes that paid tribute to the men and women in uniform. Robert Curtin, the director and producer for the documentary, says it's about showcasing the struggles that Canadians faced following 14 years in Afghanistan. He says it also pays tribute to the 158 Canadian military members who died in the war and those who returned home and faced significant challenges.
Karen and I have been interviewing personnel for over 6.5 years, and though that's personnel of all ranks, they're in many cases heartrending stories. There are a lot of tears. Many of these personnel are suffering from PTSD. What is gratifying to us is that in many cases, at the end of the interviews, they would thank us for giving them the opportunity to bring it back out and tell that story, not only to a viewer, but also to themselves.
The segments will be filmed at Sandy Point Park near Medicine Hat on August 22nd and the 23rd. The filmmakers say they're looking for volunteers to play Canadian soldiers along with members of the Taliban. A legend in Medicine Hat is signing off. Medicine Hat Tigers play-by-play man and Vulcan, Alberta native Bob Ridley provided commentary for the team for 52 years and over 4,000 games. Ridley had been undertaking cancer treatments since last year, and he says that played into his decision to retire. Ridley also served as the team's bus driver for 45 seasons. Ridley was part of the Medicine Hat Tigers' 4 WHL championships and 2 Memorial Cup winning teams as well. He was also inducted into the Alberta Sports Hall of Fame and Museum. That's quite a career. Congratulations, Reds. 2 Fridays a month, the Lethbridge Therapeutic Riding Association brings in therapy horses to Galt Gardens. Now, next Friday, they'll be doing so again. The event will be a chance for residents to come out and interact with the animals around the park. The executive director for the association says it's also an opportunity to address the needs of some of the most vulnerable here in our community.
It's beautiful to connect with land and animals, so to give that opportunity to everyday citizens that may not have the means and the resources, that in itself is good enough. I mean, we're happy to do just that. If it was just that, that's great. However, it is much, much more. So I think we all know that there's a profound crisis downtown and around homelessness and addiction. So this is also meant to be a form of care, and it's a creative way of addressing needs.
Next week's free event will be taking place from 1 till 2:30 p.m. at Galt Gardens. There's a Christian ministry in Calgary whose goal it is to help those who are battling addictions. Craig Hill, the executive director for the Calgary Dream Center, says they're really committed to helping those make a positive change in their lives. He says they've seen a lot of success thanks to their impactful programs.
Recovery is challenging. The good news, however, is we see a massive amount of success in the testimonies and the feedback of life change. Because we're really not interested in helping people just simply put an X on their calendar where they're staying dry or sober. We are all about helping people rediscover their destiny and purpose and who they really truly were meant to be and connect with God in ways that perhaps they've never experienced before.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Craig Hill from the Calgary Dream Center and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our newscast. Samaritan's Purse and their church partners in Ukraine are delivering some much-needed food baskets to families in the red zone where violent conflict is still ongoing. We have more now in this report.
Hi, my name's Paul Carr and I'm here with Samaritan's Purse in Odessa, Ukraine. Today we're here at our warehouse. Samaritan's Purse, utilising our church partners, are distributing food baskets into the red zones, into the areas that have been heavily affected by this conflict.
Во дворе у людей Только что им прилетела кассетная бомба. И мы сейчас им привезли продукты. 2 пакета. Сейчас еще что-то привезем.
Да ну, сидели во дворе, пили кофе, курили, и начались прилеты. Во двор попало, в поле попало.
Поэтому вот такая вот ситуация. Молимся, благословляем, чтобы поскорее эта война закончилась и все было. Берегите себя, все будет хорошо. Хочу выразить, мы сейчас находимся в Славянском районе, фронтовое село. Мы привезли гуманитарную помощь. И хочу выразить огромную благодарность сумке самаритянина и всем тем, кто участвует в том, чтобы мы довозили продукты в такие села. Продуктовый набор мы сегодня привезли около 300 штук. Возвращаю обратно.
People who have been affected by the conflict here are suffering a lot, but the love and hope that we're sharing in the name of Jesus Christ here is really practically helping and is also bringing the people of Ukraine a lot of hope. So I just want to ask you just to continue to keep the people of Ukraine in your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, it appears as though the mercury is refusing to drop this week across much of southwestern Alberta as we remain under a heat warning. Full weather details are coming up. No heat record for Lethbridge, although it's still pretty hot out there. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, the temperature seems to be sitting steady around 30 to 32 degrees all week. How long will the heat wave last?
Yeah, we're looking at 32 degrees roughly right across the board all week until we get to Sunday when it will cool all the way down to 29 degrees. Lots of sunshine all week. We are still under that heat warning. Into Monday evening, we are looking at a slight chance of showers, and then Tuesday, that's where it's really going to cool down to 25 degrees if you consider that cooling down, but definitely out of the 30s by then. And then we're also looking at a chance of showers next Tuesday. So definitely cooling off then. Average high for this time of year, 26 degrees, average low 10. At 36, that was the record on this day back in 2001. And our record low was 2 degrees. That was in 1969. Sun rose this morning at 6:25 a.m. and the sun will set this evening at 8:46 p.m., giving us 14 hours and 21 minutes of daylight. So the nights are getting longer. There you go. The 27 the high tomorrow in Victoria. Lots of sunshine there. 28 in Vancouver. Vancouver under a heat warning to persist right through till Thursday. Inland, the humidex looking at 38 degrees. Now tomorrow in Edmonton and Calgary, sunshine at 30 degrees, high humidex. Calgary also sitting under a heat warning. As for the rest of the prairies, a beautiful 30-degree day in Saskatoon. Beautiful sunshine at 27 the high in Regina. Regina looking at a chance of showers with a risk of a thunderstorm. Winnipeg only 19 degrees tomorrow, also looking at 30% chance of showers in the afternoon and a possibility of a thunderstorm. 28 the high tomorrow in Toronto. Toronto also looking at a 30% chance of showers. Clearing in Ottawa tomorrow, 23 the high there and 22 the high in Montreal under mostly cloudy skies. As we get to Atlantic Canada, we are seeing lots of rain, a possibility of thunderstorms, 23 the high in Fredericton with showers, a chance of showers tomorrow in Halifax as well, 23 the high, fog patches and showers in Charlottetown, 24 the high there, and only 20 degrees tomorrow the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with chance of showers. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A decade after closing most of its locations, Zellers is looking at making a big comeback next year. The discount chain will debut a new e-commerce website and expand its brick-and-mortar footprint within selected Bay stores early next year. The return of Zellers comes as soaring inflation drives consumers to discount retailers in search of lower prices. CMHC says the annual pace of housing starts in July moved higher compared with June, despite a slowdown in urban starts. The housing agency says the seasonally adjusted rate of housing starts in July was just above 275,000 units. That's an increase of 1.1% from June. The annual rate of urban starts was down 0.8% in July, while multi-unit urban starts fell 0.3%. The pace of single detached urban starts dropped 2.3%. Elon Musk caused a bit of a stir, tweeting that he was buying the English soccer team Manchester United. But several hours later, he said it was all just a joke. It comes as the billionaire Tesla owner faces a legal battle in the United States after backing out of a deal to purchase Twitter for $44 billion US. With his fortune, Musk would have been a welcome prospect for many fans who want to see the club back to the top of their game. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 88 points on the day to finish at 20,181. The Dow was down 171 points to 33,980. The S&P 500 was down 31 points to 4274, and the Nasdaq was down 164 on the day to 12,938. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.06 on the day to $87.59 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 14 cents to $9.19 US. Gold was up 4 cents to $17.61.81 US an ounce. And silver was down a cent on the day to $19.79 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.50 per bushel, barley's at $7.79, canola's at $18.46, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle were up 45 cents to $141.75. Feeder cattle were up $1.73 to $183.25, and lean hogs October contract was up $1.48 to $98.05. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $77.45 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Ottawa is moving forward to ban the importation of restricted handguns on Friday. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino says the Trudeau government will push ahead with an importation ban without the approval of Parliament moving to take the policy change through regulatory restrictions. The measure will prevent nearly all individuals and businesses from importing handguns into Canada. Apparently, not everyone with the province is on board with a provincial police force in Alberta. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will have details shortly. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We would love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Come and fill yourself with delicious ribs at the Lethbridge Rotary Rib Fest at the NMAX Center August 19th, 20th, and 21st, beginning at 11 a.m. Admission and parking are free with walk-up or drive-through options. There will not only be mouth-watering ribs, but live entertainment, food vendors, and a 50-50 draw with proceeds going toward the Lethbridge Rotary Club's community projects. It's 3 full days of a smoky barbecued finger-licking good time at the Lethbridge Rotary Rib Fest. For details, visit southernalberta.com. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The UCP have proposed a deployment plan for the potential Alberta Police Force. What is most interesting is that the province is still not fully committed to the idea. To talk about this in more detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joins us from Edmonton. Tyler, is the idea gaining even more traction? An initiative like this would be quite costly and would see a major reorganization of RCMP detachments across the province.
Yeah, so what was released this week was essentially the boots on the ground kind of plan, and sort of the high level overview of it is that the government is proposing to sort of reorganize the 113 RCMP detachments into about 65 to 80 community detachments, then 20 to 30 sort of service hubs, they're calling them. So that's where you would have things like the tactical and canine units that would be in sort of larger but still small centers. And the idea is to sort of take some of these services and move them from Edmonton and Calgary into smaller sort of population areas. And what the government says this will do is set a minimum detachment size of 10 officers. Apparently some detachments in the province are more like 3 officers, and that should help things like response time and all that sort of stuff. it would amount to, the government says, about 275 new officers in sort of rural and small town Alberta. So this is sort of the logistics of it, not a super exciting announcement, but it gives us a look at what this could look like. And as you mentioned, the really strange thing is they haven't fully committed to it. They're still in sort of the study phase, the consultation phase. There will be even more consultations with Indigenous communities if this goes ahead. I asked Tyler Shandro on Tuesday, the Justice Minister, I said, look, can you put a number between 1 and 10 on where you guys are at on this? And he said, well, it's really going to be up to the next government to make a decision on this. So, could be another UCP government, could be the New Democrats who have been, really critical of this. They called it a boondoggle on Tuesday. So probably not going to happen if the NDP forms government next spring.
And a lot of the detractors, those who are against the idea of an Alberta Provincial Police Force, have been talking about how much more money it will cost Alberta taxpayers. What are you hearing right now?
Well, that's right. In particular, the rural municipalities sort of came together at a general meeting earlier this year and sort of officially said, no, we don't approve of this. We don't have enough answers. We're worried about a downloading of costs. And the issue basically is that with the RCMP, you have a cost-sharing agreement between the province, municipalities, and the federal government. And I believe the federal government's chunk of that is about $170 million. So the province would lose that money if it transitioned to its own police force, and would have to make it up somewhere else. And then, of course, there's all the rest of it, right? There's detachments. Do you need to build them? Are you going to rent them or lease them? There's the equipment. Are you going to buy that from the RCMP? Do you have to source it? So there's a whole sort of separate pot of money, I think about $400 million that would have to go to simple transition costs. So, there's the deployment issue, there's the politics of it, and, also the financial implications.
Tyler, we've been chatting a lot about the UCP leadership quite a bit here, but it appears as though the Alberta Liberal Party cannot find a new leader. The nomination period passed without anyone officially putting their name forward.
Yeah, so once a party that formed government, about 100 years ago, I think, but they did form government at one point, and they couldn't find anyone. So the party is still going to have its interim leader for the time being. They did say they had interest in it, but for sort of personal reasons, people didn't want to step up and become the party leader. So a bit unclear, let's say, about what that party's future is going to look like. And I think the probable explanation for this is that the progressives in the province have just sort of lined up behind the New Democrats, sort of a two-party system as opposed to a multi-party system. We've seen sort of the same thing on the right with the Freedom Conservative Party, with the Wild Rose Independence Party, just haven't really managed to make a big splash here. So just, shifting dynamics, I think, across the province in terms of where people are casting ballots.
Now, when it comes to the UCP leadership, Danielle Smith received more endorsements recently. That included our own Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf, former Justice Minister Casey Medu, and former Ag Minister Devin Dreeshen. And also, a couple people have switched their allegiances from Travis Taves to Danielle Smith, notably Nate Glubish, I believe the Service Alberta Minister, and Pat Wren, who's Northern Alberta MLA. So, there's folks sort of lining up behind Danielle Smith. She's getting a lot of the press. She's getting a lot of attention. Everyone is sort of responding to the announcements she's made. The Alberta Sovereignty Act, for example, that's the thing that people are responding to, as opposed to sort of really being able to seize the narrative, I guess, on their own. But the thing to keep in mind, of course, is that there is the attention someone's getting, and there's the memberships that people have managed to sign up, and the ground game, and the phoning supporters, and all that stuff. So, from the outside looking in, it's a little bit hard to say, what the dynamic is, but there's no doubt about it that Danielle Smith looks like the front runner at this point. Also on the leadership trail, Brian Jean has vowed to tax companies that use commuter workforces, hoping them to maybe hire more locals, or for commuting workers to actually become Alberta residents. Right. And of course, Alberta has a large commuter workforce. You think of all the people from the Maritimes in particular who came to work in the oil sands. So Brian Jean, of course, from oil country up north there. And, he's said that this will have implications for the oil sands industry, and also talking a little bit about, what about healthcare? If you can get people to come to Alberta to work in the healthcare industry, maybe settle in smaller towns or places that are hurting for staff, he thinks that this might be, a way to encourage people to come here and stay here. And Alberta has like a huge quarterly migrations, between about 7,000 and 17,000, I think, people per quarter, sort of over the last 5 or 6 years. Obviously, the pandemic made that drop to more like 1,000 or 2,000. But, lots of migration in and out of into the province, I should say. So this is a potential strategy to get people to permanently
stick around. And, as I just said, people playing response to Danielle Smith, well, here's an example of someone trying to break out and get a little bit of attention with a policy announcement.
Let's talk about more people moving to our beautiful province, migrating here. The UCP launched their new advertising campaign called Alberta's Calling. It's directed at workers in Vancouver and Toronto. Now, you and I have been to both of those cities here. Alberta is much more affordable here. It's fairly safe. There seems to be a lot of solid opportunities here. Do you think many people and workers from Vancouver and Toronto would consider moving to Alberta?
Well, it's a good question because, one of the things that there's been a little bit of research on it, a couple studies in the last year or two, and one of the things that people have been leery of is sort of the culture, the political culture. Of course, Vancouver, very different political culture. Toronto, very different political culture than parts of Alberta, certainly. You're going to have a very different experience politically in Medicine Hat or Lethbridge compared to, downtown Edmonton. So that's something that actually the campaign does not talk about very much. It really talks about the economics of it, the affordable housing, the job opportunities, the fact that salaries are considerably higher here. And it's, sort of a bus campaign and a transit station campaign with posters and things like that. And it's, I believe, a $2.5 million advertising campaign. So, one of those things that I think is very, very hard to predict whether or not it'll work. But, given the way the economy is looking right now, which is pretty good, and given that some businesses are struggling to attract a workforce, we have a burgeoning tech sector, the film industry, and so on and so forth. There might be an opportunity there. Certainly, the government thinks there is.
Also, don't forget too, we only have a GST here, not an HST. So
that's right. The lower tax burden will certainly be a selling point for some people, I'm sure.
Now, Tyler, a couple of folks have announced that they will not be running in the next provincial election in 2023. Most notably is Darren Billis, following a 10-year career as an NDP politician.
It's tempting to read a lot into these sort of announcements, I think. You look at Darren Billis, you say, oh, well, why is he leaving after, a successful career? What's going on in the NDP? There isn't really any evidence of that sort of thing. And the other person who's leaving politics is Doug Schweitzer, who is the Justice Minister, I think, back when the UCP first formed government. And it's sort of, and again, it's sort of a similar thing. You could do this kind of analysis. Is Schweitzer more on sort of the moderate wing of the United Conservatives? If he's looking at a potential Danielle Smith victory, maybe he wants to get out. Not saying there's evidence for any of this, but this is one of the things that you can sort of keep an eye on in the weeks and months to come. Who's staying, who's going, who's replacing these people, and maybe what does that say about the party, and what does that say about moving forward? Let's say the New Democrats form government in 10 months' time or 8 months' time, whatever it is. Darren Billis would have been a cabinet minister again, most likely. So who's going to fill his boots moving forward? So just a small little story, but in some ways you can think about what it tells us about the state of Alberta politics, I think.
Read between the lines, absolutely.
Exactly.
Tyler, Premier Jason Kenney has made a comment on the Alberta Sovereignty Act. Speaking on his radio show over the weekend, Kenney called Danielle Smith's proposal nuts.
He sure did, and said it would make Alberta the laughingstock of the country, said it would be a body blow to industry. So very briefly, for viewers that might not be up to speed on it, the Alberta Sovereignty Act is a proposal from the Danielle Smith campaign that would basically, if it worked, say that Alberta could ignore federal law, could ignore federal court rulings, could ignore federal regulatory decisions, say around industrial projects, things like that. It's been honestly fairly widely criticized by scholars and by politicians. But I think this is the first time that Premier Kenney has spoken out about it. A couple other people in the party have as well, most notably Jason Nixon, who said he doesn't even think it would pass the legislature, even if the UCP was in government. So, this is another example of what we talked about earlier, of people responding to what Danielle Smith is putting out there. And so Kenney criticized it. Danielle Smith said, this is premature. Wait till you see the legislation, that kind of thing. So if she ends up becoming the leader, becoming the premier, we should find out relatively early on in her tenure what this might look like.
Tyler, it appears as though the Alberta government found itself embroiled in some controversy over an essay about women and their role in society. A written piece that finished in third place in this essay writing contest.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. It was 5 essays submitted to this contest about women. And this essay in particular was basically about how women have this sort of unique role as childbearing and child-rearing members of society, and that they should perhaps not be working in order to focus on that. There should be medals and awards given to women who have children. And also it sort of argued that there was sort of this cultural suicide happening by women not having children. So this sparked a huge controversy, a middle of summer controversy, but a controversy nonetheless, with people criticizing it as racist and sexist. And it was just sort of this weird thing because nobody in the government really seemed to know what happened or how this happened or who awarded the prize. You had some apologies from ministers who were involved. The NDPs called for resignations. Kenny said it was a mistake. There haven't been resignations, and sort of very few answers at this point about what exactly happened. So just sort of, a number of unforced errors, I think, on the government's part. Maybe all their comm staff are on holidays right now or something. Who knows? Because it was a very strange one that maybe could have been dealt with in a matter of days instead of sort of consuming a news cycle for, about a week. But a weird one nonetheless.
Now, Tyler, turning to healthcare, the NDP have been hammering away on the issue here in the province. The Rachel Notley crew have been talking a lot about ambulance delays, lack of ambulances for emergencies, and overcrowded emergency rooms.
Right. So these are, not particularly new issues in terms of Alberta or the healthcare system, and, not unique to Alberta at all. British Columbia is having the same problem in some of its small towns. But, the thing to note about this is not that it's, special or new or anything like that, but the NDP very firmly believe that this is a really, really important issue to Albertans and that this really resonates with Albertans and that this is a thing that they can talk about on the lead up to the next election. They can talk about it during the election, and that's going to resonate. So it's an early look, an ongoing look at one of the things that the NDP really thinks is important and really thinks is something that will bring them voters and keep their voters, something that they think they have a better record on, a better potential on than the United Conservatives. So it's again, looking at that election 8 or 10 months down the road, what are the NDP talking about? And certainly the big one, as it has always been, is healthcare. So it'll be interesting to see how their attacks, how their lines sort of shift on that in the months ahead.
What it should also be a big election issue as well is how a lot of the municipalities, including here in Lethbridge, are not happy with the province centralizing EMS dispatch. The province says, well, we're saving about $600 million a year doing this. What are you hearing now? Is there potential with maybe the new UCP leaders saying, you know what, we're going to go back to decentralization and having the municipalities have more of a hand in ambulance services?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm racking my brains a little bit on what they've actually said about it. And I do think it's one of those things that we could see some movement on with a new leader. And I think there is a study being done on it at the moment. I can't remember by whom, but it is sort of being looked at. So, certainly there's a lot of pressure, and it's a little bit like the coal thing that happened, that had been earlier this year, where the UCP suddenly changed this thing and outraged all these sort of small conservative parts of Alberta and had to sort of back down. So you could see some movement on it, I think, and certainly if the New Democrats win the next election, I think that there will be some major changes to that.
He's our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Thanks again for joining us today from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
Well, homelessness and addictions continue to be difficult challenges in communities across our country. Some of you may have either struggled with these things personally or know someone who has. Is there hope, though? Well, today's guest says there is. Joining us from Calgary is Craig Hill. He is the Executive Director of the Calgary Dream Centre. Welcome to Bridge City News, Craig. So great to have you on today.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so Craig, first of all, maybe give us a snapshot of the history of the Calgary Dream Centre and what you're all about.
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I'd be happy to. We have a really special story from our beginning. We were really birthed out of the notion that there's a need, and the need was real. The need was not going anywhere, and we felt that we could address it. And I'll just give you a very brief snapshot of our backstory. It was a little better than 20 years ago. There was a church in Calgary that had heard of something called the Los Angeles Dream Center that was needing people to come down and help them get off the ground. And we heard that invitation and we responded, and we found ourselves in LA, well outside of our comfort zone, doing things that we had never experienced. We were helping folks under the bridges. We were helping people in Tent City. We went down to Skid Row in LA, and we were just dealing with whatever need was presented to us and finding ways that we could offer help. And help was simple. It was sandwiches, it was clothing, it was letting folks know on the street that there was a place that was now open to help if they wanted help. And it was so impactful that we would regularly, this church in Calgary would go down a few times a year. And as we would continue to see the impact and the fruitfulness, the vision was caught by the team, and they realized Calgary needs a dream center. And with that, well, sounds like a great idea, but how do we do this? Where do we do this? Right. And a team was put together. It was referred to as an Issachar team, a group of people that could discern the time and the season. Let's find a place and begin this dream. So one of Calgary's worst hotels, a hotel that had a reputation with police and bylaw, had a strip club, a heavy metal bar, and a third bar in it operating. That became the targeted building, and we were able to secure it. And we transformed a building that was used for very dark purposes into a facility that was going to change lives. And we opened the doors with 3 staff, and 12 residents began about 18 years ago. And since that time, we've been operating and have seen incredible impact and incredible fruit and been able to expand our influence. And with that, we feel like we've just now, 20 years later, we've kind of figured some things out, and we're just getting started.
Wow, what an incredible story. So, Craig, who are these people who come to you for help, and what kinds of problems are they typically dealing with?
The folks who come through our doors, this is not a cliche answer. They are truly the most everyday folks that you could expect to see. They are somebody's son, somebody's husband, brother, father. And we have gentlemen who come to us from very dire circumstance that they've lived on the streets for years, and others who have made decisions that have taken them down a path that they never fathomed that they would go down, and they are reaching out for help. So we have young men that are young adults, and we have folks that are senior in years and everything in between. We have well-educated, and we have those with no education, because the truth is, addiction and homelessness, it's no respecter of persons. It can unexpectedly sneak up on anyone, and we see all those sorts of folks here.
Yeah, that's so true, Craig, because addiction doesn't discriminate, right? It can happen to absolutely anyone. You mentioned gentlemen. Is this open to only men then?
Dream Center started originally as a men's facility, and it was in this one hotel that was on McLeod Trail in Calgary. And since then, we have expanded, and we have women's programming as well. We've had a women's recovery program that recently we had to press pause to because of some of the challenges, all things pandemic and facility. But we have had a women's program that we will be relaunching again. And we have safe housing also for a number of women in the city. We have a couple of facilities that they're able to go to. So it's men in our program. And we have at any given time here, we have a program that's available for up to 30 men for a 7-week program where they're here at the Dream Center facility. And then they're also able to, if they like, graduate into transitional housing, which is further space within this building that they're able to stay and get themselves settled and put a recovery plan in motion. And then even beyond that, we have homes throughout the city. We have a number of properties where a person can move into, stabilize, be safe, secure, and really get reestablished and reintegrated into society.
Sounds like such a wonderful program. Now, how often do your clients maybe fall off the wagon or get back into addictions again? And if they do, what's the process to help get them back on track?
That's a very, very tricky question to answer and difficult process for these gentlemen, because it can happen at any given moment. Now, how do you determine success rate? Well, we tell these guys that the process really is not like they've climbed a ladder, and when there's an incident or an episode, all that motion and success now goes back to zero. It's not like that. It's a journey where they've come from here, and now progressively they make it this far, and then an incident or a challenge happens. They don't have to go back to zero. They're able to continue from that place of progress. And we do see that. You'll see that. It's difficult to give you a specific number because folks do go about their journeys, but it's not uncommon at all for us to see folks who They were here 7 years ago and now they're coming back, and their language is, I had to come home. I had to come back for a tune-up. Recovery is challenging. The good news, however, is we see a massive amount of success and the testimonies and the feedback of life change, because we're really not interested in helping people just simply put an X on their calendar where they're staying dry or sober. We are all about helping people rediscover their destiny and purpose and who they really truly were meant to be, and connect with God in ways that perhaps they've never experienced before. And there's the difference maker as well that I have to say I have seen. Those who experience what we refer to in this building as something special, because we welcome everybody from every walk of life, from every faith background. You can bring in any belief system you want here, but if we do our job well, we've been able to direct people to the God that we believe in, and He is the difference maker for sure.
Okay, so now you are a faith-based organization, so at the core, I guess, of the Calgary Dream Center is that faith. So how do you go about sharing this or sharing the gospel with the people that come through the door, I guess, like your clients, and how do they respond to that?
I had a gentleman come up to me this morning after our session together, and he just said to me, I have never experienced anything like I have experienced here. I've been to church, but this is different. You know, and it's interesting because when people are at rock bottom, there's just a receptivity, and many of your audience today will understand that Jesus is so close to the brokenhearted, and there's something extraordinarily special about when someone is at that place of brokenness and dependence, that God just shows up in a way that's so tender and powerful and special. What happens here is a person literally can come in with their story, their belief, their lack of belief, faith, no faith. And if we've done our job well, we've given them the science, we've given them the tools, and they realize the Calgary Dream Center is different. And we don't shy away from telling them that in the recovery world, Jeanette, there's often language referred to as higher power. That's kind of an understood, safe tone in throughout recovery communities and meetings. And we say at the Dream Center, our higher power is Jesus Christ as expressed through the Bible. And we're going to share with you who He is to us and the difference that our faith makes in what we do and how we do it. You're welcome to believe or not believe, but that's where you are. So when you come into a faith-based organization, you haven't come into a church where we're here to convert you to our belief system, but you're going to be exposed and understand why we do what we do, the way we do it, and you're going to be invited into conversations that are unique and special. And then I'll give you one more side, that is, on Sundays, there's a church that meets here. It's called Imagine Church, and it's fully optional for these men to attend if they like, if they don't want to. And more often than not, most of the guys hear this beautiful worship music coming from the hall and begin to poke their head in, or they've heard from someone in the building that church is different. And you'll find these guys in program and not be able to differentiate between the PhD, the junior high school teacher, and gentlemen who are in program, because it's the whosoever is here. And that experience is really having a huge impact and exposing them to faith.
Mm-hmm. Now, Craig, a big part of recovery is finding a steady job, of course, and a stable home. So can you maybe explain how you help these individuals get jobs and how the Calgary Dream Center's house settings work?
You're right. See, we're much more than just trying to get them clean for a few days or the X on the calendar. It is about restoring them to productivity and to their families. So part of what's happening through their 7-week program are dealing with life skills and career skills and dealing with those, helping them with very practical things about, this may sound pretty base, but oftentimes they come with no identification. They have no means of reestablishing credit or cleaning up those things that are in the closet, the credit issues or things with the police, and all that sort of stuff needs to be addressed in order for you to take that next step. And our case managers on a weekly basis are having appointments and resourcing the gentleman in that direction. And then one other thing that we're really proud to be able to do is in the last little while, we have opened here at the Dream Center a thrift store. And we're able to have some of our men or women volunteer or serve at the thrift store. We have a cafe right here in the building that gives opportunity for folks to participate in. We've got staff positions that we make available to those who have graduated. So we really see it's incredible. You can come from a broken place and we'll help you to move into career and stability again.
That's amazing. Now, Craig, what are the signs of addiction? Like if you notice that something is off with one of your kids at home or a loved one that you see struggling, what should we maybe be aware of?
The signs that a person needs to look for would be just changes in behavior that are significant and noticeable: withdrawal, change in your rhythms of sleeping. And that may sound like, well, that's just what teenagers do. No, it's much more than that. A lack of almost a sense of suspicion and duality. Everybody is beginning to operate with a little bit of a different lifestyle. The patterns of the day-to-day just subtly start to change. And then when you feel like perhaps you're being told stories that are not true, that is a huge flag, because one of the key things that a user or someone struggling is they have to begin to paint a dual life. And the stories being woven together just don't line up with the person that you know that individual to be. So look for those little tells, and also just countenance. You can begin to see the effects of drugs as an individual is using them quite quickly. That may sound simple, but I think the key here is you please don't ignore the promptings and those little indicators that something may not be right, and then ask the questions that need to be asked and listen carefully. Is this true? Does this align with the person you know them to be, or is there something here that's just not right?
So if we do notice those signs of addiction, how should we be responding? What are the do's and the don'ts?
If someone is not interested in getting help, you're going to have to just, story as difficult as this sounds, there is very little that can be done until somebody wants help. If they do want help, find the resources that are available quickly. Begin to reach out. Support is available through organizations like ours. There's tons of resources, and put those before your loved one, the person you care for. And if I could encourage, it would be do these things quickly. The sooner you get a hold, because the crisis right now, it's merciless, it's ravaging lives. And the sooner you can begin to help somebody get on the right path, obviously the better.
Okay, and then finally, Craig, because we're almost out of time here, how can people get in touch with you guys at the Calgary Dream Center? How can people get more involved in helping you guys too?
Sure, appreciate that opportunity to share. There's always volunteer needs here. Person can reach out through the calgarydreamcenter.com. All the information is available online. You can find our programs if you need help. You can find resources if you need help, volunteer opportunities. And then I would invite you to consider looking at some of the testimonials. You're going to begin to realize the beauty that is available, the other side of this disease and what's ravaging people. There is hope, and we're able to tell stories of hope. If you want to be a part of that, please, by all means, visit us, calgarydreamcenter.com, and you can learn more.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Craig, for being with us today. We really appreciate having you on.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Craig Hill is the Executive Director of the Calgary Dream Center. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.